Good evening. We're learning Maseches Yevamos daf nun ches, starting 2 lines from the bottom on nun zayin and beis. Yesterday we started a chuppah that was Amen. Yesterday we started a sugya called Yesh chuppah lepsulos or Ein chuppah lepsulos, a question of whether or not the chuppah itself, that moment in time, even had there been no kedushin, Rashi said yesterday, could it be the case that a chuppah is powerful enough to generate a psul in that woman, even if there's no tashma shamita? That was a discussion yesterday, and we're going to see if that is extended from our Mishnah, which spoke about Kiddushin and not Chuppah. So let's have a look. Amar Rabbi Chama, Amar Rami Bar Chama, Yesh Chuppah lepsulos. In regards to the machlokes of Yesh Chuppah lepsulos, Banu lemachlokes Rav Meir, Rav Elazar, Rav Shimon. This is similar to the machlokes that we had in our Mishnah just yesterday between Rav Meir and Rav Elazar and Rav Shimon. Rav Meir is on one side and Rav Elazar and Rav Shimon are on the other. On the top of Daf Nun Ches Amud Aleph, the Gemara says, Le Rav Meir, according to Rav Meir, who in our Mishnah says the Amar Kiddushin Pasle. So for sure, Chuppah Nami Pasle. If you're going to hold that Kiddushin, just betrothal, would make a woman ineligible for truma, then certainly the chuppah itself, even without tashma shamita, certainly the chuppah itself would mean that she is going to be psula from truma. However, the Rabbi Elazar, Reb Shimon, Damrei Kedushin Lo Pasle, maybe we should say that if in our Mishnah, when Rabbi Elazar and Reb Shimon hold that Kedushin does not pasla a woman, maybe they'd also agree that the same halachos apply, chuppah nami lo pasla. So the Gemara is trying to say that there's really a correlate, almost like just two like party lines, is that at chuppah and or kedushin, according to one shita, both are fine. Both women are going to be fine. They're allowed to eat truma, and according to the other, they're not. So the Gemara wants to know if this is considered a reasonable comparison. The machlokes of Rav Meir versus Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon on the one side, and can that be compared to the machlokes of yesh chuppah lepsulos and ein chuppah lepsulos? The Gemara says in Mimai, how do you know to compare this machlokes of yesh chuppah lepsulos and the case of Kiddushin Pasle? Are those actually linked? Dilma, perhaps they're not linked at all. Maybe we can say that Adkan lo ka'amar Reb Meir Hasam. Maybe Reb Meir only held of his shita that Kiddushin is pasal, el b'Kiddushin dekanila, because Kiddushin is actually a kinyan. The transaction portion of the chuppah is not the chuppah, it's the Kiddushin, it's the betrothal, it's the ring itself. Aval chuppah de lo kanila. When it comes to the chuppah itself, where there is no kinyan, maybe really Reb Meir would not agree that we can compare the world of Kiddushin to the world of chuppah as it relates to the psul of truma for the wife. Inami, another reason why we might not be able to compare these two worlds is Adkan lo ka'amri Reb Elazar Reb Shimon leniently hasam el b'Kiddushin de lo kriva lebia. Maybe the only reason they were lenient by the Kiddushin was because Kiddushin is not followed by bia. Now, the way our chuppahs work is a little different. Our chuppahs, we do Kiddushin and Nisuin together, but back in the day, they do Kiddushin first, and then many months later, they would do the actual chuppah. So by the Kiddushin, there was no proximity to Tashma Shamita. That was not allowed. And therefore, maybe we should say that the halachos are different from Kiddushin than they are from chuppah. Aval chuppah de kreva lebia. Maybe in regards to the case of yesh chuppah lepsulos, the machlokes that we were discussing yesterday. So maybe we'd say that because the chuppah is in proximity to bia, because the marriage has now been completed on a halachic front, and now they're mutter to one another. Maybe hachanami de pasla, and therefore you cannot compare the machlokes of yesh chuppah lepsulos and ein chuppah lepsulos to the case of our Mishnah of Kiddushin pasle or Kiddushin lo pasle. So the Gemara says, if you do want to say that there is something to compare the machlokes of yesh chuppah lepsulos and ein chuppah lepsulos, what should we compare it to? There's another machlokes tanaim where we can overlap and overlay the shitas of yesh chuppah lepsulos and ein chuppah lepsulos. What's that case? The Tanya, the Brisa writes 10 lines down Nun Ches Amud Aleph. Nisu zu es zu, if a man marries one or the other, who are those one or the other? Ksheros upsulos, women who are kosher and pasal to a kohen. O shenichnasu lechuppah v'lo nivalu, or that they did in fact get married, but there was no tashma shamita. Ochlos mishalo ve'ochlos betruma. The women are allowed to eat truma in those cases. Says the Gemara, asking a kasha on the Brisa, and we'll get back to the Brisa in a minute, but asking an interjecting question on the Brisa. Nichnasu, when the Brisa says nichnasu, what does that imply? Michlal de nisu mamish, that they're fully married, and the Gemara doesn't say it outright, but what it means is that there's tashma shamita, that's regular normal chuppah and chuppah v'kiddushin. So says the Gemara, elalav, that's it must be kigon shenichnasu lechuppah v'lo nivalu. It must be that we're talking about a case where there was no tashma shamita, and yet what does the Brisa say? V'ktani ochlos mishalova ochlos betruma, that the women are allowed to access truma. If that's true, then that is like the shita of ein chuppah lekiddushin, where the chuppah doesn't ruin the women, as it ein chuppah lepsulas. It doesn't make them problematic as it relates to truma. However, the dissenting opinion in this brisa is Rabbi Shmuel ben Osher Yochanan ben Baroka, who says, Omer, kol shebiyasa ma'achilasa, chupasa ma'achilasa. We look at what the Tashmish Amita is capable of doing. If the Tashmish Amita that takes place, it would be a matir for her to eat the food, then great. And if not, not. Chupasa ma'achilasa, v'chol she'ein biyasa ma'achilasa, ein chupasa ma'achilasa. It's all based on the Tashmish Amita. So that's what the Gemara says, is maybe our machlokas, if yesh chupa l'psulos and ein chupa l'psulos, maybe that machlokas is connected to this case of nichnasu l'chuppah v'lo nivalu. So says the Gemara, half a third of the way down. Maybe this is not a good comparison either. Our second rejection of a compared machlokas of the day. Dilma, perhaps Rabbi Shmuel ben Osher Yochanan ben Baroka, maybe the reason why he holds the way he does is because Kirav Meir Sfir Leida Amar Kedushin Lo Achla. He says that when it comes to Kedushin, that she's not allowed to eat. And if he's holding like the party lines of Rav Meir, so then his Shita can't be aligned at all in this case. Says the Gemara, wait, if that's true that he holds like Rav Meir, that in Kedushin there's Lo Achla, then the line that he said of Kol Shebiyasa Ma'achilasa, that's an error. This line that he said of Kol She'ein Biyasa Ma'achilasa and Chupasa Ma'achilasa, that's the wrong language. Shouldn't have spoken about Chuppah if he holds like Rav Meir. Rav Meir holds of Kedushin. So he says, Kol she'ein biyasa ma'achilasa, ein kaspa ma'achilasa. The financial equivalent, namely Kedushin, the transaction of Kedushin should be ma'achilasa. Mibayle. We should have that. Why doesn't, if really Rav Yochanan ben Baroka is holding like the party line of Rav Meir, so then his catchphrase in the brisa of Kol she'ein biyasa ma'achilasa should have said ein kaspa ma'achilasa. So the Gemara responds halfway down, not necessarily a good raya. Maybe the reason why Rabbi Shmuel ben Osher Yochanan ben Baroka used the word chuppah was only for the symmetry of the Mishnah. Dilma Ahidi de Amar Tanakama chuppah, Amar Ihu Nami chuppah. So you can't bring a raya from there, and therefore the Gemara says that the shita of Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka may very well be like the shita of Rav Meir. So then the Gemara moves on to, it's all the connected sugya, but we tried to compare two sugyas to the machlokes of yesh chuppah l'psulos or ein chuppah l'psulos, and we failed on both. Halfway down, the Gemara says, Amar Rav Amram, ha milsa, Amar lan Rav Sheshes. There was something that Rav Sheshes told us, an hirinu le'ainin mimas nisin, and he brightened our eyes from our Mishnah. Namely, he brought a raya for us from our Mishnah. Okay, what did our Mishnah say? Yesh chuppah l'psulos. And what does the Brisa say? V'tana tuna, Brisa teaches the following. It says the word amen. What is the pasuk here talking about? It's talking about an isha sota. Ve'amra ha'isha amen ve'amen. Amen, amen. And she says the word amen. What is she saying amen to? So it says the Brisa, trying to understand what the pasuk in Chumash means when it says that the woman would say amen, says the Gemara, shalosa tisi arusa. I was not inappropriate while I was an arusa. Unesua, and when I was an Nesua, when I was a Shomeres Yavam, Uknusa, and when I was married. Now, already out of the gates, the words Nesua and Knusa typically mean the same thing. Usually that's how we lahachnis, those are similar words. We'll discuss that shortly. But first and foremost, the Gemara wants to understand, what does it mean when the Isha Sota says, Losatisi Arusa? Hi arusa hechidami, 2/3 of the way down. Ilema de kanila kshehi arusa. If the husband was kanila, he showed his jealousy. He warned her that he didn't want her to be yichud with another man. The kamashkala kshehi arusa, and the assumption is that she drank the meisota when she's in arusa. Arusa bas mishtiyahi. An arusa, the nes nigle of the meisota does not work with an arusa. Says the Gemara, Vatznan, Arusa v'shomeres yavam lo shosos v'lo notlos ksuba. The shomeres yavam and the arusa, they're not allowed to drink. Great yedias klalius. The meisota doesn't work for an arusa. You have to be fully married for them to work. So if that's true, then what then was the case of the arusa where the woman was saying amen, lo satisi arusa? What was the case? So says the Gemara, Ladekani lakshihi arusa. Yes, the husband warned her when she was in arusa, don't be alone with that man. V'istatra, and she in fact was alone with that man. But when do they give her the meisota to drink? V'kamashka la kshihi nesua. But she doesn't drink the meisota until after she's married. Says the Gemara, mi badki la maya. Will the water still work under those circumstances? Why not? V'atanya, the pasuk says, "V'nikah ish me avon." If the man is clean from sin, then bodkin es me avon hamayim bodkin es ishto. Then the water will in fact work. Oh, Tanya, thank you. V'nikah ish me avon bizman shaish menuka me avon. When a man has not done anything wrong, then hamayim bodkin es ishto. But ein haish menuka me avon, ein hamayim bodkin es ishto. When a man is not clean from avera, then the waters don't work. Now, it's not clear from the Gemara what's going on, but the Meforshim explained that when he says he's not naki me'avon, it means that he has slept with his wife after she was alone with another man. So therefore, the waters won't work that way. If the case we're talking about is a case of arusa, and the flow of events, the way we're describing the case of where a woman says lo satisi arusa, where she did not do anything inappropriate as an arusa, it means that they got engaged halachically. Of course, no tashma shamita. He said to her, I don't want you to be alone with that man. She was alone with that man. Then she became married. And then they did the stira. And then they did the mesota. So says the Gemara, that can't work, because if the husband was with her when they got married on the night of the chuppah, so then the din is that the mesota would not work. Ella, it must be the kanila kshehi arusa. Really, the case was different. 10, 12 lines from the bottom. Really, he warned her about being alone with a particular man when she was in arusa, and she broke the rule, v'istatra, and she was alone with that man. And v'nichnasav lechuppah, but v'lo nevala. They did get married, but there was no tashma shamita. V'shmamina yesh chuppah lepsulos, and maybe we can learn from here that yesh chuppah lepsulos, that there is a chuppah that can passel a woman, because this woman could become passel. It says the Gemara, that's not a good answer. Omar Rava v'tizbra d'hamitaratztahi. You think you did a good job explaining this brisa about what the case was of an arusa who was warned by her husband. After all, v'haki asa Rava Rabbi Acha bar Chanina midroma, when he came from the south, asa b'aisi masnisa biyade. He brought a brisa with him. What does the brisa say? The brisa is quoting the pasuk, and the pasuk says, "Mi baladei ishech," separate of your husband. In order for the mesota to work, the couple has to have been intimate at least once. But if in fact she was alone with another man before she was fully married, so then the mesota doesn't work. So let's just review when the mesota works. The mesota never works when she's in arusa. The mesota never works if they've never had tashma shamita. They first have to be a couple first. Doesn't mean that the stira can't be there. She can warn the wife, but if they've never had tashma shamita, so then that's a problem. So then says the Gemara, Amar Rami bar Chama mishkach asla. What case do we have that can explain for us the case of arusa? Says the Gemara, kegon sheba lea arusa bebeis aviha. Oh, so the Gemara says that they broke a halacha. They got halachically engaged, and they shouldn't have, but they were together when they were engaged. And then she was bestira with another man, and then they were in Nisuin, and then she took the mesota, and then whatever the results were, they had tashma shamita in the Beis Chamiha before they were halachically fully married, which is of course very asur. Says the Gemara, if the standing assumption of the brisa is that the arusa had tashma shamita while she was still bebeis chamiha, maybe we should say the same thing about the other cases in the brisa, like the case of shomeres yavam. Says the Gemara on the bottom line of Nurches Amud Aleph, the chavasa gabe shomeres yavam. If we apply that same case to a case of a shomeres yavam, sheba la yavam bebeis chamiha, that if the shomeres yavam was in her father's house and they had tashma shamita, so says the Gemara, shomeres yavam karyasla. Why is the Mishnah calling her shomeres yavam? Ishto ma'al yahu, she's a regular wife. The Amarav kanala kol. Tashma shamita, as we saw in the Mishnah, ben b'shogeg, ben b'mezid, ben b'onis, ben b'ratzon, that no matter what the motivations are, if there was any intent for intercourse, they are married. They are married no matter what. If there has to be intercourse, but as long as there's some intent for intercourse, plus intercourse, even if it's shogeg mezid, we don't care. Even the crazy case of Nitka, where he falls off of a roof and they end up having tashma shamita, then halachically she is Yevama. So if what we're saying is that the case of the bride says that really tashma shamita happened beveis chamiha in her father's home, so then the phrase of shomeres yavam doesn't belong in the brisa. She's not a shomeres yavam anymore. Now she's just a regular wife. It says the Gemara, maybe we're not looking at it from the lens of Rab. Maybe we're looking at this brisa through the lens of Shmuel. Kishmuel, what does Shmuel hold? To Amar, the tashma shamita with a shomeres yavam doesn't always make her into a yavama. Lo kana ela l'dvarim hamur b'parsha. Only that which is explicitly in the psukim. Says the Gemara, that's not possible that we're going like Shmuel. Midihu taima ela l'Rab. This whole sugya was brought about because of Rav by Rav Sheshes, which we saw yesterday. Ha'amar Rav. And we paskin like Rav. And how would Rav learn our Mishnah? What is the case of the Yevama where she maintains her title of Shomeres Yavam? Says the Gemara, Kigon de'avad b'maimer. It was a case where Maimer was done. Ubeishamai hi de'amre Maimer kona kinyan gamor. It's not really only the Shita Beishamai. There are a lot of other Tanoim who hold this way as well. We saw this Gemara a couple of blot ago. Where was this? It says Chavtes. It was also someplace else where we saw that there were many shitas of Maimer who hold that it's a Kinyan Gamur. So it says the Gemara that if you have a Shomeres Yavam who has had Maimer, the Gemara says, Yihachi Hainu Arusa. She's no different than an Arusa. A Shomeres Yavam who gets Maimer from her new husband to be. So that's called an Arusa. Says the Gemara, yeah, you're right. There is a double of cases here, but it's not the only time it happens. Because what were the 4 cases that were listed here? We had Arusa and Shomeres Yavam, and we had Nesua and Knusa. So the Gemara says, Nesua v'Knusa lav chada milsi. Of course, they're the same cases. Those languages were exactly the same. Ela Nesua didei, one is talking about his own marriage, Knusa dechavre, and one is talking about the marriage of a friend. You're talking about the marriage of someone. In this case, we'll see soon that it's a Shomeres Yavam. Hachanami Arusa didei v'Shomeres Yavam dechavre. So there are various cases of marriage, and there are various cases of being an Arusa. So you're right that the cases are similar, but we don't mind. And the Brisa that's saying that when she says Amen to whatever promise she has to make, she was saying it in all of these cases, in Arusa, in Nesua, in Shomeres Yavam, and in Knusa as well. So this is all how we understand this discussion within the name of Rav. And let's just review briefly. We're trying to understand the Brisa that's 2/3 of the way down, where Rav Amram said in the name of Rav Sheshes that he brought our Mishnah as a raya, and he brought the Mishnah. Our Mishnah was being brought as a raya to the case of the Brisa that says Amen Shalosa Tisi Arusa v'Nesua Shomeres Yavam Knusa, and we didn't understand Arusa, so we're saying the case of the Arusa was where they had Tashma Shamita in the Beis Chameha when they were only engaged, which is Aser. Then she was warned. Then she was Bastira with another man. Then she became a Nesua, and then the Meisota would still work. It's just really fascinating because the Meisota. It's funny because the Tashma Shamita that takes place by Beis Chameha is an Isser. Now, had they had Tashma Shamita after Nisuna, it would have been mutter in regards to Tashmish itself. But Afal Pikein, the Meisota still works. There's like this metaphysical reality to when the Meisota works. It's an ace, but it has rules to it. Okay, so all of that is answer number 1 to how we understand this brisa about the Meisota. Rav Papa Amar, quarter of the way down on Unchesim at Beis, Rav Papa says, Hai Tanahu Detanya, Ein Mekanin La Arusa Lashkosak Shi Arusa. We don't even give the kinui when she's in Arusa. The case is we don't give her the lahashkosak she arusa. Aval mekanin osel lahashkosak she nesua. We do give her the kinyan to drink the wine, to drink the meisota when she is nesua. Says the Gemara, Rav Nachman Ritzla Kamar al yedei gilgul. What does this mean? This means that really when she's in arusa, they can't even ask her to promise at this point whether she's been bistira because they're not even married yet. So what we do is what's called gilgul. Rashi explains this case to mean as follows. It's true that we're not allowed to make her make a promise when she's in Arusa. However, when she's in a Sua, we can ask her to promise that if she's been Bistira once she's been married, and we can be Megalgil into that Shvua, that which took place during the Arusa time. That's what Rashi explains. And that's what Gilgul Shvua is, when we can't do one Shvua because of a halachic limitation, but once we're doing another Shvua, we can throw this one into the pot as well. Then good. Okay, so those are the 3 answers that we are seeing here, the Tashma Shemitah beforehand, and the 2 answers we just saw about Rav Papa and Rav Nachman. 2 more quick sugyas for the night. We'll be stopping in Mirza Hashem at the Mishnah on the top of Nun Testament Aleph, and then tomorrow we'll be doing a Mirza Hashem a blot and a half, something like that. Okay, next case. The Gemara says, Shalach Rav Chanina Mishmed Rav Yochanan. Rav Chanina asked a question in the name of Rav Yochanan. Ha'osa maimer b'yevimto. Let's say that a man does maimer to his yevama, v'yeshlo ach, and there's still another viable brother, so Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi. Shimon did maimer to Rachel, Ruvain's wife. Ruvain died, and Levi is also available. Afilu hu kohen v'hi kohenes. If Levi, the third brother, even if he's a kohen and she's a kohenes, the halacha is that if maimer was done, pasla mina truma, she's no longer allowed to have truma. So says the Gemara, whose shita does this work with? Liman. Ilema the Reb Meir. If you want to say that this is like the shita of Reb Meir, Eimar da Amar Reb Meir mishtamer sabi absula lo achla mida oraisa. When do we say that a woman who is about to have tashma shamita with a man, that she'll become psula, and therefore she cannot eat the truma? That's only true in a case that's deoraisa. But here, what's Levi's limitation from Rachel? It's just Maimer, and Maimer's only derabanan. Therefore, derabanan mi Amar. It can't be that this case of Levi who wants to be with Rachel, it can't be the case that we're going within the camp of Rav Meir. The Ella says the Gemara, maybe we should say the Rebbe Lazar Reb Shimon. Maybe we should say that it's like the Shita Reb Elazar Reb Shimon. What do they say? It certainly isn't like them, because they hold that even if they are anticipating a tashma shamita that would be usher, they still say she's allowed to eat the truma. So of course, if it's derabanan, they're going to say she's allowed to eat the truma. So how do we understand this brisa? How do we understand this statement from Rabbi Yochanan? The Gemara says we have to try much harder. Ella says the Gemara 2/3 of the way down. Kiasa Ravin Omar, he said as follows: Asaba maimer biyavimto divri akol achla. Everyone agrees that if maimer is done from a yavam to a yavama, everyone agrees that she's allowed to eat. Yesh lo ach chalal. If Levi, the third brother, is a chalal, divri akol eina ochelas. If they plan to get married, the chalal and this Eshes Cohen, she's not even allowed to get married. Everyone agrees that eina ochelas. Lo nechlaku. The only conversation point comes up as follows: Ela shenosan lo get. If Levi gives her a get, then what? Rabbi Yochanan amar ochelas, then she's allowed to eat. Reish Lakish amar eino ochelas. Why? Rabbi Yochanan amar ochelas, because afilu l'Rab Meir damar eino ochelas hanimili mishtameres l'bi absolute doraisa val derabanan achla. Because here we're only talking about a limitation between Levi and Rachel that's derabanan. It's only Maimer. Maimer is only a kinyan derabanan. Reish Lakish amar eino ochelas. Reish Lakish says that they're not going to be kona in this case where the mimer was given. So why is that? Why does he say that they're not going to be ochelas? I feel the Rebbe Reb Shimon, who are generally matir da'amre ochelas, here they would not say that. Hanimili, when are we lenient? When we have a person who, under a different circumstance, would be able to halachically get married. But in our case, where the get was given, there's no possibility with this woman that they could ever marry because there was a get. The Gemara says, maybe we should say that there is a case where a man gave a get, where his wife could have food again, a truma. How so? When she goes back to her husband's house, to her father's house, excuse me. If a woman goes back to her father's house, then she's choseres, then choseres paskami v'krova lebenasha. So maybe we can say that there is a case scenario where a man who got divorced from his wife, that his wife, who was a Kohen, is able to again have access to food, in which case we have a kasha. Maybe we can understand this machlokes, like Rabbi Elazar ben Reb Shimon. Aval, says the Gemara, in our case, it's not really true. If there was a get that was given without chalitza, it's not correct. If there's a get given without chalitza, so then there's no solution at all under those circumstances. One last case for the night. Armalu onis garshu. The Gemara is going to now discuss a din that we know, that the Kohen Gadol has to marry a woman who's a basula. Now, we typically translate a basula as a woman who has not lost her virginity. However, when it comes to the Kohen Gadol, there's a special din that he's not allowed to marry someone who's even lost her basulim by the world of nature. And therefore, he marries very, very young. And that's what's going to be happening in our Gemara. And once she turns a bogeres, once she's a gedola by 12, and she's a bogeres by 12 and a half. So the Gemara's question is like this, 2 lines from the bottom on Ches Beis. B'amine Rav Chia bar Yosef mishmuel. Kohen Gadol shekirish es aktana. He did betrothal to a young girl, who bagra tachtav, and then she became a bogeres, 12 years and 6 months, tachtav. Mahu. Are they allowed to get married? Do we say basar nisuan azlinan? We just follow the nisuan. Or basar erisin azlinan? Which one do we follow? Is he allowed to marry her if she's a bogeres? Because maybe some of her basulim has begun to disintegrate, or no? Amalei Tanitua, we already learned this. What did we learn? Our Mishnah, this armalo onis garshu min hanisuan psulos, erisin ksheros, that the tashma shamita is going to be problematic because she might be a psula. So says the Gemara, you misunderstood. Amar Le, that Mishnah is l'shavye chalala lo kami boili. I'm not talking about a Mishnah to establish someone as a chalala. That's not what we're talking about. The biyahu de mashve chalala. If there's tashma shamita, then that can cause for a problem. I agree. Ki kami boili in regards to the parameters of the halacha of a kohen gadol marrying a woman. V'hu isha b'sula yikach mai. Where do we focus on? Kicha de kedushin ba'inan. Do we need it to be on the kicha when he actually is doing kedushin because we need kedushin? O kicha de nisuin ba'inan. Or does it have to be the moment in time when there's nisuin? So Amar Le, he responds back to him. Shmuel says, "Hi nami tanitua." Was it Shmuel talking? Yeah. So Shmuel responds, we also learned about this. Let's say that an almana got engaged to a regular kohen, which is mutter. That's mutter. And then that kohen, after they got engaged, was appointed to be the kohen gadol. who's not allowed to marry an almana, but they're already halachically engaged. Says the Gemara, in this case, so maybe we can learn from this case where a man who is a Kohen, a regular Kohen who is engaged to an almana, and then he becomes the Kohen Gadol, who's not allowed to marry an almana. So the pasuk seems to say that the Brisa seems to say that they're allowed to marry. It says yichnos. So maybe we can assume the same over here, that once this girl becomes a bogeres, once she's 12 years and 6 months old, okay, they've only been betrothed, but just like the almana is allowed to marry the Kohen Gadol under those circumstances, so too over here, the Kohen Gadol is allowed to marry a bogeres. Says the Gemara, not a raya. Shiny hasam dechsiv yikach isha. That's not necessarily true because the pasuk specifically speaks about ki yikach isha. So one pasuk is specific, talking about a besula, and the other pasuk is talking about an almana to a kohen gadol. They're not talking about the same thing. So says the Gemara, hachanami ksiv isha. It says word isha in both places. Says the Gemara, achas v'lo shtayim. We're talking about one woman. We're not talking about two. You cannot squeeze into the pasuk both the case of bogeres and the case of an almana marrying a kohen gadol. Says the Gemara, Maruais, why is it that you think you're right about your case? Maybe the word isha is not talking about what you think it is. Says the Gemara, the reason why we learn the word isha in a specific way is because ishtani gufa. When it comes to the girl who was married halachically, betrothed as a ketana, and then she became a bogeres, there ishtani gufa, her body changed. She went from being prepubescent to pubescent, whatever the halachic age is, but we look at her as a bogeres now. Now she's old enough. But in the case of the almana, lo ishtani gufa, her body didn't change. He changed, and it wasn't even his body; it was his job opportunity. Became the kohen gadol. So here the Gemara says we can't learn anything about an almana who was engaged to a regular kohen who became the kohen gadol to the case of a kohen gadol who was engaged to a ketana who became a bogeres. Those two cases are not comparable. We'll stop here. Mir Hashem on Shabbos. We'll pick up at the new Mishnah on Mentes Aleph. Wishing you all a beautiful night. What? Oh, on tomorrow then, on Thursday. No, Friday. Friday's the day off.